Hey there, everybody. It's PTPOP here with all four lobes of my brain securely bound behind my back. And welcome to another episode of PTPOP, a mind revolution, where I lead you out of the rabbit hole, one grain of truth at a time. And on tonight's show, I've got a great guy, Mike Williams, uh, author of Sage of Quay Radio, Beatles conspiracy theorist, world-renowned Beatles conspiracy theorist. And tonight we're going to talk about Mike's background as a hypnotherapist and how hypnotism may in fact be used in the production of popular music that we all listen to every day. Thanks for being on tonight, Mike. How's it going?
That's going very well, Peter, and thank you so much for inviting me back to your show.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for being here. And I know this is kind of a deep topic, um, but I think you'd be the perfect person to talk to about this. How did you get your start as a hypnotherapist?
Going back to 2009, I was looking for some good books on near-death experience because I was always fascinated by it. And in my search for a good book, I stumbled upon another book that had to do with spiritual regression, hypnotic regression, and past lives and life between lives. And that book was from the Michael Newton Institute. And the title of the book was Memories of the Afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read the write-up on Amazon, and it interests me. So I decided, let's give it a shot. So I didn't know anything about Michael Newton. I, of course, knew about reincarnation, but I didn't know much about past life regression, experiencing past lives through hypnosis. I mean, I heard of it, but I didn't have any level of expertise in it. So I bought the book and I read it. I think it's something like 32 case studies coming out of the Newton Institute. And when I got done reading the book, I was completely fascinated by it. And I thought to myself, I want to see if I can get myself one of these sessions. So I wound up connecting with a practitioner in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is about 2 hours from where I live. I live in the Raleigh area in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my sessions in the fall of 2009. I had a past life regression, and I had the next day a life between lives. So the difference is a past life regression is when you go into deep trance and you go back and you experience one of your past lives.
Mm-hmm.
A life between lives is that period of time in between your physical incarnation. So it's the time that you spend in the spirit world. So to make a long story short, I had two great sessions. I had the past life on a Thursday, and I had the life between lives, also referred to as an LBL, on Friday. So when I drove home after the Friday session, I was thinking this was an amazing experience. And a few weeks after that, I decided that I would like to train in this type of work. And so what I did was I contacted my practitioner. Her name is Brenda. And when I went to see Brenda for my sessions, I didn't know who she was. She was just a practitioner that was, uh, she was a referral on the Newton Institute's website. And I asked her, I said, hey, do you know of any good schools where I can train to become a hypnotherapist? And she says, as a matter of fact, I do.
Hmm.
She teaches, she taught. So I took her course. And I took her course in the early part of 2010. And it was a very exciting time. It was just something that I really, really wanted to train for. I thought my experience was great. I knew that the work would be great. And so by June of 2010, I was completely certified, not only in clinical hypnosis, but also in past life regression. And that's
Okay.
when I started my practice in mid 2010. And I was in practice, private practice, for 12 years. I had a very busy practice, and I did hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of sessions, both spiritual sessions, which would be past lives and between lives, and also clinical hypnosis, helping people to quit smoking, vaping, drinking, weight,
Sure.
all that stuff. So uh, I was board certified by the International Association of Counselors and Therapists. And that's what I did for 12 years after my stint in the corporate world. So I spent 32 years in the corporate world, Pete, and
Wow.
12 years of private practice as a hypnotherapist. 4 of those years overlapped because what I was doing was I was uh, working to bridge to a new career once I retired and left the corporate world. So,
Hmm.
yeah, and I retired from my practice in September of 2022. I
Okay.
felt 12 years was long enough. I was 63 at the time, and my daughter was pregnant with our first grandchild, and my wife and I wanted to spend more time with the kids
Yeah.
and to do other things, quite frankly, other than work.
So you get into hypnotherapy. So at what point did you connect the dots between hypnotherapy, pop culture, and music, and what music may be doing to the masses that the masses are unaware of?
Well, I connected the dots early on, not so much with the music industry, but um, as far as mainstream news was
Yes.
concerned.
Yeah.
So once I became trained in hypnosis, and I was also a a instructor. I was a hypnosis instructor. I was with the International Association of Counselors and Therapists. That's my teaching was sanctioned by them, and I worked actually with the person I went to go see for my first sessions, Brenda. We became very good friends and colleagues, and we worked together for almost a decade.
Hmm.
So during that period of time, early on, I should say, but as time progressed, I was able to apply my knowledge of hypnosis and techniques to other areas in our reality. But the news, the mainstream news media was it was very, very obvious.
What did you see in the mainstream media that stuck out to you?
Repetition. So the key to hypnosis, the key to getting somebody to change their behavior. So hypnosis is really about behavior modification. So if we approach it from that perspective,
Hmm.
and so when you watch the news, you're going to see a lot of repetition. And the inner mind or the subconscious mind loves imagery. This
Hmm.
is
Oh yeah.
very, very important.
Yeah.
So let's just, as an example, let's pick on a cable network like Fox News. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to present some kind of conflict, some kind of tragedy, some kind of shooting, something that's disruptive, something that is dysfunctional, something that is worrisome to most people.
Sure.
So they set the table that way. And then what they'll do is they will have looped video that they will show over and
Yeah.
over and over
Yeah.
again. And a
Yeah.
lot of people will ask, gee, don't they have any more video than that? Why do they keep
Yeah.
showing that loop? Well, the reason why they're showing that loop is because they're trying to pull you in and nail it into your inner mind. Now, if you think in terms of your mind having a hard drive, it's a very good analogy. So these files get written to the hard drive. So these loops, because the
Hmm.
inner mind loves imagery, it's taking in this video. It's taking in the whatever it is that they're showing you. They show it repeatedly over and over and over again. But not only do they do that, but then they have the quote reporter or the anchor person talking, and what they're giving you is hypnotic suggestions,
Yes.
worry, concern,
Yes.
tragedy, be fearful,
And they do
and
it with tone of voice.
tone of voice.
And the editing of the loop you're talking about, I've noticed this in films. I learned this on my own. It's very quick edits. It's
Yes,
like no more than 3 seconds of the guy laying bleeding on the ground. Then you cut to the car. Then you cut to the building he crashed in. Then back to the guy bleeding on the ground. And it's very fast. It's staccato. Is that
Yes.
right? Am I onto something there?
Yes, no, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And the other trick that they use is you'll see spinning logos. So Fox
Yeah.
News will have this. Now, this is eye fixation. So when you people tend to watch the logo going around, what this does is
Yes.
this lulls you into a trance. So
Yes.
there's four basic trance states: beta, which is your waking state; alpha, which is below beta. This is a light trance state. This is where you're at when you're watching TV, when you're
Mhm.
watching a movie. Below that is theta. Theta would be when you go into hypnosis, deep
Yeah.
meditation, and then delta. Delta is sleep. So beta,
Okay.
alpha, theta, delta. So when you're watching television, you're watching Fox News, and you see that spinning logo, and you're watching the loops, and the reporter or the anchor person is giving you these hypnotic suggestions, you're being lulled into a trance state, and now you're taking this all and you're in hypnosis. The other
Yes.
thing that they do, Peter, is at the very bottom, they will have a ticker tape, which is showing stock prices, right?
Or news, current
Or
news,
news, right?
which all started on 9/11. That
And
that
that
all
has
started.
nothing to do with stock prices or the news. It's the same thing as the spinning logo. You're watching it go across the screen and you keep watching it
Wow.
and you're watching it. It's like when you go to bed at night and you read a book, a lot of people will say, I want to read a book at night to relax, but I can't get past a page or two before I feel sleepy.
Hmm.
So this is the same thing that's going on. Now, the other thing that they do is they have the use of colors. So blue and red are very
Hmm.
popular.
Yep.
So aside from being Masonic colors, the Blue Lodge and the Red Lodge, blue, from the mind's perspective, is received as very calming, the voice of reason. Don't worry,
Yes.
everything's under control.
Yeah.
So a lot
Yeah.
of times you will see the reporter or the anchor person or somebody that they're interviewing will be wearing a blue shirt,
Or there were the background. They're bathed in blue
backgrounds,
light in the background. Yeah.
exactly, and or they'll wear a blue tie. So when they
Yeah.
bring somebody on, they have a blue tie, a blue jacket on. They're talking to them. They're presenting this person as the voice of reason. This is the person that's going to have a calming effect. Everything's under control. No need to worry.
Yeah.
Then they'll have people come on that will be dressed. A woman reporter or the anchor person might have a red dress on, or the man will have a red tie on. Red is interpreted by the mind as be alert,
Hmm.
something is concerning. It means stop,
It's passionate. It's
worry.
anger. Yeah.
Okay, so it means all those things. That's how the
Yeah.
mind interprets the two colors. So think of blue and red as on two opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to how the mind interprets those colors. So the point I'm trying to make is there is a multifaceted approach to how cable news and even network news goes about setting the hypnosis session up for the person that's watching their television, because at the end of the day, that's exactly what it is, Pete. You're sitting down for a hypnosis session.
Let me ask you something really quick about the news.
Yeah.
Local and national, they do death, murder, rape for 25 minutes. Then the very last story is a little puppy dog was found today in a bushel of hay and it was rescued. And why do they, is there any science to the where they end it with the soft puppy dog story? Or is that just a production thing?
I think it's probably a production thing, and also so that they can say that they balance the scales between all the heavy, dark stuff. And look, we gave you a little happy
Yeah, yeah.
piece of footage here in a little segment. But the vast majority of what we watch, especially at the national level and even at the local level, has to do with stuff that's disruptive to our lives, things that we would be fearful of, uh, shootings, tragedy, all kinds of stuff.
Exactly.
Every time a hurricane comes, what do they say? It could be the worst hurricane in 100 years. Every hurricane has that tagline. That's to get people all lathered up, get them concerned.
Hmm.
getting them to run around like a bunch of chickens without their heads, heading out to the supermarket, buying everything they could possibly get their
Yes.
hands
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
right? And then go home and wait for the storm. And in most cases, that doesn't happen, right? They're almost always never the hurricane of the century.
Sure.
Um, so the point I'm trying to make is that uh, it's all or mostly all doom and gloom.
Mhm.
And the reason why they do this is because that's exactly where they want people. They don't want people to be upbeat because an upbeat person will be productive. They want you unproductive. They want you to be concerned. They want you to be stressed. That's
Yeah.
why they're always giving you, this, aside from the fact, that they gaslight people. Everybody knows, as an example, that the job market, the economy is terrible.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then they will get on TV and tell you that it's great.
Oh,
Inflation's not
yeah.
that bad. Employment numbers are up. This is another technique. It's another mind control technique to to make you feel like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
I mean, this person on the television is telling me the economy's good, inflation's not bad, everything's great, yet my life doesn't seem to be clicking along very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is what is referred to as gaslighting. So to answer your question, what really got me looking the first thing I looked at was the news and how it was being presented. And then, as time went on, I was looking at other areas, and ultimately I started taking a look at how it was presented in music. Music gets a little trickier because and I know we'll talk about this, because it's music, and it's very difficult to convince people that music is being used as a way to create behavior modification, to
Hmm.
to program people
Oh,
to
sure.
believe certain things, to behave certain ways. So that's a more difficult thing to get through. I think it's easier for people to see how the news is manipulating people's minds. It's a little more difficult to convince them that their popular music or their bands are doing that.
Sure. And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning was we're both Beatle fans, and when
Yeah.
I was a kid, the Beatles consumed my life. I mean, it was almost instantaneous. From the moment I heard "I Want to Hold Your Hand" and "She Loves You," I was obsessed, and I stayed that way for a good 20 years, where I would actually get into fights with people, not physical fights, but verbal altercations, defending my band, and just buying anything I could related to the Beatles, and it was all I thought about night and day. And then as I woke up from this dream world, Beatle dream world, I said, what was that all about? Why was I so obsessed with this music? And that's why I want to talk with you, because I want to see, is there some type of hypnotic messages in these music? Is there a frequency that they're broadcasting in the recording studio that they mix into the music that puts our brains into some type of vortex, or a retractor beam that locks us in? And that's where I am. I just wonder why all music is like this. It affects me. Most music used to affect me a great deal. Not anymore though. It has an opposite effect on me now. I'm irritated with music now as I'm older, which is strange.
It's the first thing we have to, I think, visit, um, is to go back to what Tavistock is very good at. So Tavistock, for those that don't know, from a deep state perspective, Tavistock is the propaganda and social engineering headquarters of the New World Order, the deep state, however, or whatever label you want to apply to the shadow government. And two things that they're very good at is creating cults and getting people to think in a childlike manner,
Hmm.
to keep adults from critically thinking like adults. In other words, having adult reasoning, adult logic. So what they want to do is they want to push that reasoning and logic down to a child's level. And I'm not trying to be funny here or facetious. This is exactly what they
Sure.
do, because when that happens, that's when adults have these emotional responses to things. So they have these knee-jerk reactions to defend their belief system, and their belief system is embedded in the cult or whatever it is that you're invested in. So using the Beatles as an example, the Beatles are a cult. I call it Beatleism.
Hmm.
The fan base is legion. They are extremely loyal, extremely dedicated.
Oh
They
yeah.
will defend the band, to the end of days.
Oh yes.
And I
Yeah.
and, I- and I was like that too, Peter. I
Oh
was
I
the
yeah.
same as you.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
These arguments that I would get into about how great the Beatles music was and no band was better than them and all that stuff.
And I've run into that on my YouTube channel,
Oh yeah,
with people just going off on me like, "Who is this guy? What do you know?" And you know, I was like that once. I was just
yes,
like, "Oh God," But yet,
yeah. But that's the cult aspect of it, Peter. So that put that in one little box. That's the cult piece of it, and then you have the reducing the thinking down to that of a child or an
hmm
adolescent. So this is why you and I get the responses that we do when we present our videos on the Beatles and we question the official narrative. What's happening is the child programming is coming out in these people, and they're blowing a fuse. They're
hmm
becoming irate. I mean, you have to see some of the comments that I get. I mean, they don't make it onto the video because you block these
yeah,
people, but they could be belligerent,
oh yeah,
nasty, and it's why. It's because you're questioning their belief system.
yeah. The foundation from which they were hypnotized. I think we were all hypnotized,
Yep.
and somehow we were. You feel threatened subconsciously. You feel threatened. The foundation of your existence. My God, threatened the Beatles or whoever your band is. I've seen, guys in high school. We'd get in these verbal screaming matches about Def
Yes.
Leppard versus the Beatles or, whoever the band was at
Oh,
the
the
time.
Stones and the Beatles were the,
Oh
were the
yeah,
big
yeah.
one when I was growing up, and
Oh yeah,
it almost wind up in a fist fight.
yeah. Crazy stuff. Yeah.
So you have to start from that perspective, and the reason why I want to start there is because you have to understand that everything that goes on um, in the entertainment and the music business, that is not happenstance. It's not just rolling along organically and naturally, and it's not coincidence that certain things are happening.
hmm
It's all very, very planned out by, and for the sake of simplicity, I'll say the deep state and the various functions within the deep state, with Tavistock, like I said, being the center, the focal point for brainwashing and social engineering.
Sure.
So they're going to pull out every rabbit they can out of the hat, and one of those rabbits is frequency and vibration, sound. So music is sound. I mean, it's frequency, it's vibration,
Sure.
and it's been long known for a very long time by those that study psychology and psychiatry that music has a tremendous impact on shaping people's emotions and their feelings, and also can alter their behavior, their ways of thinking. Um, Pete and I, folks, have a document that goes back to 1965. It has to do with the Beatles, hypnosis, and communism. And it was written back in 1965. It's a 20-page document. Maybe what I'll do, Peter, I'll send you the link so people can download it and take a look for themselves.
Okay. Yeah, I've
But
got it here too.
yeah, but in that document, it clearly talks about how hypnosis, excuse me, how music can be used to put people in a hypnotic state.
Sure.
And it talks about how this begins at very early ages when we're kids,
Oh yeah.
certain songs. And of course, the 20-page article, it's actually a small, I guess 20 pages would be a small pamphlet or whatever. makes its way into the Beatles and the Beatles sound and all of that. And that there is a science behind popular music to transform the way people think and the way they react and the way they behave. So, hypnosis is behavior modification, and music is one of the tools in the toolbox to create behavior modification.
Yeah, and the article says that the Beatles are basically a communist plot to undermine the youth and the family structure in America at the time, um, through the use of these hypnotic beats and frequencies and harmonies. And the article was kind of dissed because of the Cold War between the two countries, communist Russia and America. And I found it kind of fascinating because as you read it, you're like, now you understand it. But back then, I can only imagine this guy probably got flack like crazy for being a lunatic, because of McCarthyism and everything else that was going on at the time.
Yeah, so I know we don't want to major on this, but to
Yeah.
explain that, the communists, when they talk about a communist plot, what they're really talking about is Marxism. And more specifically, we're talking about cultural Marxism. So, cultural Marxism is the implementation of Marxism or communism in a subversive way by subverting from within. So, essentially, bringing the current system down by infiltrating the government organizations
Yep.
and so on. The other form of communism, which some might refer to as Lenin communism, going back to the Bolshevik Revolution in the early 1900s, and Russia, was their tactic was violence.
Yes.
But what happened in the 1920s and 30s, that was the formation of the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School is out of Frankfurt, Germany, and it was uh, a congregation of Marxist uh, intellectuals. And so they went to their fellow Marxists and communists and said, look, this hitting people in the head with a hammer, that's not going to work. Okay. So this violence is just going to it's going to turn people off. And so we're not going to accomplish our goals. So the goal of the Frankfurt School was to have a subdued approach to implementing Marxism. And one of their leading intellectuals there was a guy by the name of Max Horkheimer. And Max had said that they will implement Marxism in a very methodical, incremental way, and in such a way that the population, the masses, won't even know. So, so that's why when they talk about the Beatles, that article that from 1965 that you and I were just talking about, when they talk about the Beatles and communism, they're really talking about the Beatles and the implementation of cultural Marxism, because the Beatles were one of those one of those tools to bring about the change in a very subtle way. When I say subtle, I mean without the violence, without revolution. It's a quiet
Hmm.
revolution. It's a revolution that's taking place that took place very, very methodically. So, but the article, like you said, Peter, I'm sure back in the day that guy probably got clobbered because
Oh, sure.
they would have thought he was some kind of fringe lunatic. But now having the hindsight of 60 years later and looking back 60 years, we could see that the people involved in that article and that analysis, they had a pretty good grasp on what was coming.
So, what connection do you see or do you make between your education and your experience as a hypnotherapist and what you hear and see in music?
Well, what we're seeing in music is it's repetition, number one. So, as I mentioned, repetition is very important to be able to program the mind. Human beings are programmable. I don't like saying that But as a I was a master hypnotherapist, and as I mentioned, an instructor as well. And when I got into hypnosis, I realized that we are programmable. As an example, let me just give you, an example here. So people would come to see me, and they were smokers, and they would say, "Mike, I've tried everything. I've tried everything to stop smoking, and I just can't quit. Peter, I got, I would say 98% of my clients who smoked to stop smoking after 2 sessions within a week. So I would schedule two
Wow.
sessions within 7 days. And after the second session, they didn't smoke anymore.
Wow.
I had the same success with people that had problems with drinking, in particular, binge drinking.
Hmm.
Hypnosis is less effective if it's dependency or alcoholism. But if you're a binge drinker, in other words, you go out for the weekend and then
Sure.
you black out, but you don't drink for 2 or 3 months after that. So you're doing this binge stuff. Um, I had a very high success rate to get people to stop binge drinking,
Wow.
um, to get people to stop vaping, for people to lose weight, release weight. Very high success. So what does that tell you? It tells you that we're programmable. So how does that work? It works because think in terms of there's a hard drive in your mind,
Hmm.
and that hard drive has files. And for the smoker, there's a file written to the hard drive. It began when they first started smoking. And every time they smoked, many times smoking is done because people want to relax. So when they want to relax or take a break, smoking is what they do. The
Okay.
more they did it, the bigger the file became. The bigger the file became, it now dictated their behavior.
Okay.
And apply that to just about anything. So if somebody has a lack of confidence, it's the same thing. There was a moment in time where something happened where their confidence was questioned, or they felt that, or they were questioning their confidence, something where they felt like maybe they fell on their face. That
Hmm.
file got written to the hard drive. And now going forward, anytime they were engaging in a situation or interacting in a situation where confidence was required, and they were doubting themselves about whether they had the level of confidence and ability to get something done, that file was strengthened. And it gets to the point where the person later on in their life says, I don't have any confidence. I completely lack
Sure.
confidence. Right. So it's the same thing when we talk about music. So when we experience music, especially music that we like, it writes a file to that hard drive. And so we have an appreciation for that particular band or that particular genre of music. And so we continue to buy records or CDs or stream or whatever, however you listen. And we're listening and listening and listening. And as you do that, what's happening is that file that got dropped early on in your life is now being fed and enriched with continued inputs and reinforcement of that particular style of music, something that you enjoy.
Okay.
And so what happens now is you're completely bought in. So in the case of myself, I go back to the Beatles. So, Beatles music when I was a kid, you've heard me tell this story 100 times, but I was 9 years old when I was begging my father to take me to go see Yellow Submarine in 1968. At 9 years old, I was
Mhm.
already like this little Beatle freak.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so I love the Beatles. And so anytime a Beatles song came on, it reinforced my desire to love the Beatles, want to be like the Beatles, pick up and play guitar like the Beatles, on and on and on. So that's how it works. That's how it works with just about everything in our life. The more we engage something, the more it feeds and reinforces those files.
Sure.
And then, like I said, it defines our behavior. And in some cases, it will define who we are.
Oh yeah.
So that's how I started taking a look at music as well. And I mentioned to you before we got started with the show, uh, music is frequency, it's vibration. And the social scientists have known for a very, very long time that frequency and vibration has an effect on human beings because we are vibrational, frequency based
Sure.
beings.
Even the earth has a frequency.
That's right, the Schumann resonance. And
Hmm.
so there are frequencies that can be disruptive to us, and then there are frequencies that will make us feel good. So it goes both ways. And some people may know who are watching this, but there was a man, he's passed away now. His name is Alan Watt. And uh, Alan, in an interview that I actually included in one of my big presentations, I think it was the addendum going back a couple of years ago. And he talked about going back to the Beatles, how George Martin wasn't just a producer, but George Martin was skilled in acoustics and sound and
Hmm.
how it affected the listener. So in a way, when you think about it in those terms, aside from being a producer, George Martin was a social scientist,
Hmm.
a social engineer. So from the perspective of the Beatles, you had frequencies in the songs, the way the songs were written, the way the lyrics were presented. They would create these feelings within us. I know for me, Pete, whenever I listened to Sergeant Pepper or the Magical Mystery Tour album, because of the psychedelic um, genre,
Sure.
the way the music was put together, the way the lyrics were put together, um, I sensed color. I always said that the Beatles Sergeant Pepper album and Magical Mystery Tour always brought colors to my mind.
Sure.
And now, not everybody's going to experience that, but I did. So, uh, and I know other people who have. In fact, Kat from the Supernatural Beatles, she and I did an
Sure.
interview, and she mentioned that the music had the same effect
It's funny you
for her.
mentioned Sergeant Pepper's because when I first heard it, I was 9 years old. This is 1974,
Yeah,
and I felt it was a dark album. I don't know if you not color. I didn't see colors, but as a child hearing it, I was like, it was very dark and morbid, and weird, cryptic type of music. I've never liked the
really.
album,
Okay, okay.
and it had a weird, I don't know
Had
what you
it.
call evil feeling to it, or I wouldn't call it evil when I was 9, but now as I look back as a 9-year-old, it was like my least favorite Beatle record.
That's interesting. So it had a different effect on you than it did
Yeah.
for me. Now it's funny you say that, and I can kind of relate those types of feelings to the White Album. So when I
Mm,
listen to the White Album, there's a there's a sense of it's not colorful. It's kind of drab. And I'm not going to say that there aren't good songs on the White Album. It's just that there's a different vibe, a different
mm.
feeling, a different sense that I get from listening to the White Album than I did when I listened to Pepper or to Magical Mystery Tour.
Now, do you think this is kind of a little off topic, but the album covers, as for those of you that didn't grow up with albums, we'd all sit and stare at the album while we
Yeah.
listened to the records.
Yeah.
So as you stare at Sergeant Pepper's, like this blood red cover with these psychedelic covers or colors of their uniforms, their marching band uniforms. So do you think the colors
Oh,
from
yeah.
that album stimulated colors in your brain, and the White Album with no color made you feel it was drab? Because I think that the album designs have a definite effect, or used to in the old days,
Yeah.
on every one of us that listen to music.
Yeah. I mean, to this day, I can still look at the Sergeant Pepper album, Pete, and I like looking at it as much as I know about
Yeah,
the Beatles and what they were all about. When
yeah,
I
yeah,
look at that album cover, it's very appealing. And yeah, and the White Album was just this blank white album. We call it the White Album, but actually the Beatles didn't title the album the White Album. It was just called the
yeah.
Beatles. So, Yeah, so the colors, um, the the type of music, how the music is written, the lyrics, the frequency of the music, this all comes into play. And like I mentioned, the social scientists, the social engineers out of Tavistock, they know how all of this works. And again, it's repetition, repeating over and over and over again. Some people will say to me, "Well, do are you saying every band that was let's just pick the classic rock era
Sure.
was in on the on the game?" And I said, "No, I'm not saying that at all. What happens is they create a template. So the template would be the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. We'll
Okay.
just use them as an example. And so when other bands come into play and they get signed by the record labels, what do? Many of them emulate the the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. They emulate that sound. They emulate that approach to songwriting, maybe even
Hmm.
how the lyrics are written and stuff like that. So so that's the repetition part. Bands that are not even in on on The Secret, although many are, especially the really the bands that have hit certain pinnacles or heights that other bands couldn't even touch. Uh, that's the repetition part because they're emulating,
Okay.
you know, and so they don't have to be in on The Secret.
Well,
They're
the
just
repetition part would be the rhythms. The rhythms and the music are similar.
right.
The structures of the songs are
Structures of the
similar.
songs. Yep,
Um,
yep,
the beat, the tempo. It's Stones, Who, Beatles, Kinks.
right,
It's all very similar
right.
in construction. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. And so, we can go from the very popular bands even down to the one-hit wonders,
Hmm.
right? Some of the one-hit wonders were, obviously they were they were extremely influenced by the bigger bands like the Stones, the Who, the Kinks, and so on. So, yeah, so the music business is a big tool in the toolbox of the social scientists, of the controllers of Tavistock. So it's used to manipulate. It's used to change behavior. It's used to change morals, ethics, lifestyles. Um, it's the whole pop culture bit, where they're leading you and pushing you in a certain direction. And as we know, what they also do from a mind control um, perspective is they introduce different genres of music because they're trying to reach different pieces of the population or different demographics. When we go back to, as an example, um, uh, punk music in the 1970s, think about the word punk. Punk means, if you look it up in a dictionary, low life. Punk music, low life music.
Hmm.
So what are they doing with that? Well, the punk scene was, it was very dysfunctional. Um, they were outliers from a
Hmm.
societal perspective. So they're conditioning a group of people, the young people, to connect with that, to be outliers, to be dysfunctional, to be anti this, anti that, and to push back on the existing structures in society and the culture. Right. And that's how they force change. This is cultural Marxism, by the way. This is right out of their
Sure.
handbook.
Sure.
But I'm just picking on punk as an example. But we can look at metal. We can look at
Oh,
grunge
sure.
music, techno. Techno with the beat. You know, the vibrations from the
It's
beat
very
from techno
hypnotic,
music, very
or
hypnotic.
trance music as well.
Yeah, rap.
Now, if you had mentioned different styles of music. Now, I noticed when I was a kid, I was always trying to convince my mom that the Beatles were what she should listen to. And she grew up listening to Sinatra and all the big band stuff. She thought the Beatles were absolute crap until she heard the song Your Mother Should Know,
Yeah,
which is a schleppy,
yeah,
you know. And my mother heard that. She's like, oh my God, that's wonderful. And I always wondered if they incorporated that kind of music into the repertoire to pull in the World War II era people who were anti-Beatles to try to soften them up. You got McCartney singing the ballads. You got Lennon appealing to the kids that are angry. George is the spiritual one. Ringo's the goofy guy with the drums. It seemed like each person was like Earth, Wind, and Fire. They were each a different element to appeal to a large audience. And I think that's brilliant marketing. It can't, there's no way that can't be structured. They make it sound like it just happened. But I think they had Paul in there to bring in people like my mom or my dad they listened to the crooners. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
when
mean,
I'm
I could be
64.
completely wrong. Yeah, that was another one she liked.
Yeah,
It was another one she just loved.
yeah.
Yeah.
It could very well be, Pete, that they slipped numbers in there to appeal to a portion or a segment of the population that they weren't overly focused on. But hey, look, if we could pull a couple of people in that aren't there already,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, all the better. So, I would say that that's very possible. That's the reason why some of those songs were put together. I mean, somebody might argue, well, Paul or Billy liked to write those songs. Yeah, but he also wrote Helter Skelter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So,
Which is allegedly about a slide, a
yeah,
children's ride in a park or something.
yeah,
What I know about production, music production, if you listen to the early Beatles stuff, the She Loves You era, you've got a lot of frequencies in that music.
yeah.
You've got the constant crash cymbal, the ride cymbal Ringo, or the hi-hat. You've got that constant, and when I hear that now, it drives my brain crazy. I can't listen to it anymore. When I was a kid, it creates a hysteria in the brain. The high range of the cymbals, the driving beat. You don't really hear the bass too much in the old recordings. And I noticed that some of their more popular songs are Paul singing the higher range, which seems to be extremely popular. It seems like most pop songs, you got a guy singing almost in a falsetto voice. And I've always wondered if that was strategic too, because the frequency must engage the brain more than somebody like myself or James Taylor that sings like a baritone, lower range. It doesn't have the sexy appeal to the brain. Have you ever looked into anything like that? The
Well,
frequencies.
what I can do is for this show, I printed out this article. It's from October of 2012.
Okay.
It's titled "The Power of Music: Mind Control by Rhythmic Sound."
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let me just I highlighted some areas. I think that this will answer your question, Peter. So there was a psychologist who performed some research. Her name was Annette Shermer, and she published her findings at the Society of Neuroscience at a meeting in New Orleans. And she said that rhythmic sound not only coordinates the behavior of people in a group, it also coordinates their thinking. The mental processes of individuals in the group become synchronized. So when you think about like Beatlemania,
Mm.
if we apply Beatlemania to what I just read here, many Beatle fans, when they became Beatle fans, their mental processes, the individuals in the group became synchronized. They
Yeah.
became, they're part of that cult now. This finding extends the well-known power of music to tap into brain circuits controlling emotion and movement, to actually control the brain circuitry of sensory perception. This discovery helps explain how drums unite tribes in ceremony. So think
Wow.
about that.
Yeah.
Why armies march to bugle and drum into battle. Why worship and ceremonies are infused by song. Why speech is rhythmic. So think in terms of rap music as an example, punctuated by rhythms of emphasis on particular syllables and words, and perhaps why we dance. So think in terms of when we think about music, it's called the hook,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something that people will latch onto. And even if they don't know the words to, the verses of the song, they will know the hook, they will know the chorus, and they will
Yeah.
sing that,
Yeah.
right? So it goes on to say that the brain's decision making was accelerated by the external auditory rhythm and heightened at precise points in synchrony with the beat. So what they're saying there is that the brain was very focused on the beat. So when the people that were in the subjects in the research, when they were listening to music, when the beat was present, that's when they had heightened sensory perception. So whatever was going on at that time, that's what they focused on when that beat hit that point. So I thought this was a very interesting article, and and it explains a lot in a very,
Mm-hmm.
it's only 4 pages, as to how music can program people and how it can get them to behave, take individuals essentially, and create a hive mind mentality so that
Sure.
they all behave in a certain way, in a like manner way. Um, we can even see that with Beatlemania, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
with the screaming girls.
Yeah.
Why would the reaction be to scream at the top of your lungs, and in some
Yeah.
cases they lost control of their bodily functions.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
They
this is
wet
not
themselves.
right. Yeah, this is true. How did it get to that point where to such uh, you got into such a frenzy that you're behaving and reacting this way? Was it because of the 4 guys that were dressed in suits and with mop tops? It had to do with the music.
It's bizarre to see. And could it be just like a flock of birds? You see one bird go in one direction, they all go in that direction. So if you see one girl screaming, they all think I'm supposed to do that, or was there something in the music that was driving them insane at that moment?
Well, at Taylor Swift concerts, there have been reports of people who attended the concert to say that there were portions of the concert that they don't remember. There were songs they don't remember being
Wow.
played. And of course, this has to do with what's going on stage. So you have the beat, you have the rhythmic part of
Mm-hmm.
the song going, you've got the frequency of the music, you have the lights, the lighting, flickering lights, strobe lighting, different color lights. This all affects the mind.
Oh yeah.
And so what happened to those people is that they tranced out during
Mm-hmm.
during the concert. Now, when you're in trance, folks, that doesn't mean that you're lying on the ground and you're passed out. You could be in a trance,
Yeah.
standing up and looking like you're alive and well, but you're lost. You're lost in thought.
Oh yeah.
You're
Oh yeah.
someplace else. I mean, think about here's a good example. For those of you who have kids, especially teenage boys, and they're upstairs playing their video games, and they're so entrenched in what's going on in that video game that you call your son down for dinner and he doesn't hear you. It's not that he's ignoring you, he does not hear you.
Yeah, he's gone mentally.
He's
He's
gone.
he's wrapped up in that game, that video game.
Right. So then when you go upstairs, you're like, hey, Billy, I've been calling you for dinner now for the last 5 minutes. Did you hear me?
Sure.
No, Mom, I didn't hear. I didn't hear you. So this is being in a trance state. So this is the same thing if you go to a Taylor Swift concert or any one of these
Sure.
concerts. The possibility that something like this could happen is possible.
Well, I'd imagine it triggers the endorphins. There's a variety of chemical reactions. You go into a trance state. It's. I think a lot of it's the way the music is structured and engineered and produced. I mean, you talked about the hook. Now, a hook can be a chorus. It can be a guitar part, like in Day
Right.
Tripper.
Right.
That hook in Day Tripper is just world known. Everybody knows that hook, and it pulls you in. I remember hearing that as a kid
Right.
and just getting shivers. Just oh my god. I don't know why. I hear it now, and I've heard it so many times I can't stand it. But the same thing with "Can't Buy Me Love." I hate for all you folks that listen to music beyond 1968, but I'm stuck in the 60s in my head. But "Can't Buy Me Love," the hook is the chorus,
Right.
and they start with the chorus for a reason because it grabs you, it pulls you in, and it doesn't let go till the song is over. So I think you go into kind of a trance. based on the ways the songs are structured and engineered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
And
if
what,
that song was sung in a lower range that was like "Can't Buy Me Love,"
yeah,
people would be
no,
like, "Ugh," but Paul's screaming it,
right.
kind of, and I don't know what it does to the subconscious mind, but I think it grabs it pretty good.
Yeah. It pulls it in, and because it's exciting,
Yeah,
right. It's at a higher pitch, and it's bringing you in. It's, we would call it cutting through the mix, right?
sure.
Right. So, and the way it works is they pull you in with the music, and once you're bought into not just the Beatles, but pick any band that people follow. I
Oh,
mean,
sure.
today, Taylor Swift has the Swifties. That's a cult.
Oh, yeah.
The Swifties are a cult. And so what happens is once you're pulled in by the cult of celebrity and the cult of the music, then what happens is they can steer you because now they have followers,
Oh, yeah.
right? So with the Beatles, you get pulled into the music. You love the Beatles. You're buying all their records. You're sitting there for hours listening to the music, like you said, staring at the album covers and all this. And then the Beatles would come out and they do a press conference and they would say, "Well, I think this and we think that." And so now what's happening is, you know, because you're
Yeah.
into that mind control, you're bought into the cult. You're invested in it. So now what they say that they believe now becomes your beliefs.
Yes. Yeah.
You start to think in those terms as well because you're like, oh, okay, I didn't think of it that way, but because Paul McCartney and John Lennon or Mick Jagger or Keith Richards are saying this, then I'm going to listen to this. This is why so many musicians and entertainers and celebrities are rolled out anytime there's an agenda item that needs to be pushed. So, I mean, the big one recently was the March 2020 event with the face coverings and the shots, right?
Sure. Sure.
I mean, they rolled everybody out. I mean, they rolled out McCartney, they rolled
Yeah.
out, you know, they rolled everybody out. And
Every
that's
celebrity in the world. Yeah.
every celebrity in the world. So why is that? That's because of the mind control. It's because it starts off as hypnosis, and then they've got you hook, line, and sinker. They reel you in, and now they become they become your Pied Pipers.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you what it is that you should do, not do, what you should believe, not believe, where you should go, not go. And this is how they control the masses.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially, what they are is they are social engineering tools in human form.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
There are
know?
tools in their toolkit to manipulate each and every one of
Yes.
us
Yeah.
and push different agendas.
Yes.
Um, I think it's kind of fascinating because I always wondered if the producers like George Martin, I don't remember who produced the Stones and all the other bands, but did they sit down specifically, or does a producer take an unknowing band into the studio, go, hey, I like this song, but let's arrange it like this because the producer knows that it's going to create a certain mental effect because they're trying to sell records, number one. But I've always wondered if the producers and the engineers are the wizards behind the curtain, trying to manipulate the masses. Like, did
I
George Martin sit down and say, let's put the chorus first because that's going to grab them? I don't think Paul and John sat down and said, let's put the chorus first,
No.
if they even wrote that song.
Right.
Um, so there must be a whole science,
Yes.
either knowingly or unknowingly to the band, that's going on to structure it a certain way so it will sell and, get out to the masses.
Yeah. I think Pete, for the big time producers like a George Martin or Quincy Jones, I'm going to bet that they have a very good understanding of the social science behind using music as a way to shape society and to create behavior modification. I'm not saying every producer is schooled in
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
but there are those. I would say the big names have a pretty good idea on how to go about doing this. And then it also goes back to what I was saying before, the whole emulation piece of it. So it would go for producers too. So there will be producers. I'm going to assume there were producers that thought George Martin was the greatest thing since the light bulb as far as music production goes, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to emulate George Martin's style. How did George do this? How did George do that? You know, all of that. So even if they are not schooled um, in how to incorporate elements into the production of the music that's intended to affect people from a social engineering perspective, they're still doing it because what they're doing is, they're mapping to a template of somebody who does do that. So they're bringing in elements of George Martin into their production process,
Hmm.
and you can create it that way too. That's the thing. There's a cascading effect as well. It's not just everybody has to be trained in this stuff.
True.
You get a
True.
few leaders, right?
Hmm.
And then people follow and emulate those leaders, right? It's
Well,
like it's the thing when they talk about like self-help, and they'll say, pick somebody. If you want to be successful, pick somebody that you admire, somebody that's very successful, and then
sure.
study them. We hear this all the time in like
Yeah.
self-help
Oh yeah.
books,
Oh yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So what is that saying? It's saying be like them, do what they do, be like them. So I'm going to say that that little self-help technique is also applicable in the music industry.
Well, if you listen to modern music, they just repeat the same thing over and over and over. I can't pinpoint a specific song, but anytime I hear a current song, it's just maybe one or two verses and then they repeat the chorus 10, 15 times or
Yeah.
a certain phrase. And I'm like, they're just trying to condition people into feeling sad
Yes.
or feeling angry or I was in the locker room the other day. I was working out and there's music in the locker room and it's all classic rock and I started feeling really sad. I'm taking a leak and I'm feeling sad. I'm like, why am I feeling sad while I'm taking a leak? Well, here it was a Journey song, one of these sad Journey songs that I went to high school listening to from some girl broke up with me in 1982. And I'm sitting there feeling sad because, what's his name, Perry?
Yeah,
Or
Steve
who?
Perry.
I'm like, oh, it's because this Journey song is playing and I'm having a flashback mentally to 1982. And then I'm thinking, why do I need music in the locker room?
Right.
It's everywhere. Music is every. I went to a coffee shop the other day. I don't know if you have them on the East Coast. They're called Seven Brew. It's a drive-through coffee shop. And as you drive in, you're just awash in music from the PA system outside this coffee shop.
Yeah.
Modern pop rock. And I'm like, why is there music everywhere we go? And I just have a theory that it's because they're constantly trying to manipulate us.
Yes.
There's no need we have to have music everywhere. We've got in the restaurants, in the bathrooms, in the drive-throughs. And I think it's a tool they use
Gas
to put it.
stations too, Pete.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Go to pump your gas
at
and
the
it's on.
pump.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? And there's video screens now on the gas pumps, which
Yeah.
I don't know why we have to watch video while we're I don't know if you have those in the Carolinas, but
Yeah.
it's just insane. I'm sorry I go off on these tangents because I finally have someone that I can talk to that understands
No,
this
no, it's
because
great. It's great. Me too. I mean, a lot of
well,
times I'm talking to myself when I do this stuff.
I don't know what your wife thinks of this, but I try to talk to Meg and try to show her. But I'm afraid if I show her too much, she'll get depressed because she's still lost in it, and it's
Yeah,
her escape. And I'm like, I know if you bring somebody down too quick, it could have devastating effects on mentally and emotionally. I believe because when I started to realize all of that was going on with the media and the music and movies and TV, I just stepped. It was like this horrifying moment. Oh wait, it's all a lie. And I don't know if that sounds paranoid or sick, but I think it is.
it is.
I can't watch any. I can't. I hear Lester Holt come on NBC, and I'm like, change this channel. I cannot listen to that guy. He's just a mouthpiece for the CIA or whoever runs the news media.
Yeah, no, it
So,
is all a lie, and it's very difficult for people who are, you know, in the matrix. I'll call it the matrix.
yeah, yeah.
They live and breathe it, and that's their reality, and they think that that's how the world really works. But we have to come to grips with the fact that, as an example, the media, and that would be your cable news, your network news, it would be your magazines, it would be your radio, it would be your
Oh yeah.
television, it would be Netflix, it would be HBO, it would be Amazon Prime. All of this stuff is controlled. All of the media in this country, I think the number now is down to 5 companies. 5 companies control all of the media in
Mm-hmm.
the United States. I think in Australia it's something like 2. But in any case, the point I'm trying to make is uh, that means that 5 people, if it's 5 companies these days, it used to be 6, but I think it's 5 now.
Mm-hmm.
That just means that 5 people at the top of these companies get together and decide what it is that they're going to tell you and not tell you, or how
Oh
they're
yeah.
going to present, their stories. Uh, you have to understand, folks, that our media is it's just propaganda. That's all it is. It's propaganda. It's there. Your television set is a hypnosis box,
Oh yes.
and
And even the way it refreshes, the rate of refresh on the screen, the hertz,
yes,
puts your brain into a trance, and your
yeah,
iPhone too.
drops you down to alpha state. So alpha
Mm-hmm.
state is a trance state. In fact, we learn by going into trance state. So as an example, when you were a kid and you were in school, and let's just say you're sitting in the classroom and there's 30 kids in the class, you being one of the 30 kids. When the teacher was writing something up on the board or talking about something at the front of the classroom, did you pay any attention to any of the other 29 kids in the class? No, you were focused on what was being written on the board and or what the teacher was talking about. So when you're in a trance state, in your alpha state, what happens is you're basically excluding everything outside of you and your focus. It's your concentration and focus on whatever it is that you're paying attention to. That's how you learn. That's learning. We did the same thing when we were in college. We do the same
Mm-hmm.
thing when we're learning music or playing a song. We do the same thing when we engage in a hobby. We're very, very focused. It's a high level of concentration, and we exclude everything else that's going on around us. It's like going
Sure.
back to the kid who's playing the video game, didn't hear his mother
Sure.
calling him to come down to dinner, right? So um, that is how the television works as well. Many,
Sure.
many people get pulled into it, and they are completely engulfed and invested in whatever it is that they're watching, whether it be the news or some reality TV show. And there's always, always, always an agenda.
Oh yeah.
Always an agenda.
Yeah.
If you know what to look for, you'll see that there's a repetition of agenda items that they want to push, that they want to condition the viewer to start to accept or not accept. So if there are certain things that they don't want you to believe in or certain values that they don't want you to have, those things will be ridiculed in movies and TV shows and so on. Uh, on the other hand, if there's things that they want you to buy into, that they want you to support on behalf of their agenda, those things will be played up in a very positive way.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes on 24/7, 365 days a year into perpetuity. This will go on forever
Oh yeah. Oh
unless
yeah.
people, wake up.
I don't know if I got you off track. We covered a lot of ground here,
Yeah, no,
but
whatever.
I
Yeah,
think I put a wrench into it because I think you were headed down one path and I went down someplace
that's
else.
okay.
Um, but my phone's about to die here. I think I'm just going to use the audio,
Okay.
as I'd mentioned before. But that's more of just not wanting to edit video anymore. I'm kind of done with the whole YouTube thing. They banned me for a little while, and I'm just like, is it worth getting upset about anymore? Um, but anyway, no, I was there something else? I don't know if I got you off track about the whole frequency thing and music because we kind of went off in a couple different directions. Um,
Well, I think we kind of covered it. It's important to understand that music is used as a tool to social engineer. Music is another way to put people into hypnosis, into a trance state, and to get certain messages across.
Hmm.
So I mean, just take it from a very simplistic perspective. You're listening to the songs and there's the lyrics. Just take it from that perspective alone. So if you go back to, going back to the songs of the British Invasion, classic rock, punk music, just pick a genre. And if you're constantly playing these songs, especially if you have a favorite artist, and most people do,
Yeah.
you're constantly listening to these songs, playing them over and over again. You're constantly listening to these lyrics.
Hmm.
So you've got, I read the piece before about the rhythmic aspects of music. And from a science perspective, there's no question. I mean, it's not a theory.
Hmm.
They absolutely know that music, because of frequency and repetition,
Yeah.
will condition people. In fact, it was Bertrand Russell in that article that you and I talked about earlier about the Beatles, hypnosis, and communism,
Sure.
where he was quoted. Bertrand Russell was an elite out of the UK, and he was like an elite. He had no use for the subjects. Everything needed to be run by the elites. That we can't make decisions for ourselves, and so we need an elite class to do all of that for us.
Hmm.
And he very clearly said, going back to that article in 1965, that now again, this is 60 years ago. He's being
Sure.
quoted and saying that um, verses put to music and repeated are extremely effective
Hmm.
in shaping people and conditioning people to help the behavior modification along.
Sure. So the rhythm, the backing track is what gets you into the different state of mind in the subconscious,
Right,
and then the lyrics are the programming.
right,
If they want you to feel happy or sad or angry, like AC/DC, it's just an angry, angry sound.
right.
I listen to that to work out too sometimes because it gets my blood pump. But when you listen to it, it's very dark. Again, the singer singing really high up, and it gets your brain in like this frenzy. So I think the words, I don't know what their words really tell you to do, but there must be some meaning behind some of these bands' words that they want you to listen to. Is that
Yeah.
what you're getting to though? Like the
Yes.
words are what they're telling
Yeah.
you
The,
to,
the lyrics, the lyrics are important.
yeah.
Even if they're simple lyrics, and even if you don't think they're important, a lot of songs will in a subliminal way push sex.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
right in subliminal ways, they will push uh, anti family types of
Sure.
values.
Yeah.
If we take rap music, I mean that's the most prominent example of just extreme dysfunction as far as a cohesive society goes. I mean, a lot of the rap artists, um, and their songs were filled with violence,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and of course, uh, rap was created for the very purpose of infiltrating the inner cities and creating this dysfunctional society within the
Oh yeah.
inner city population, and creating violence. And none of this stuff is by chance. I mentioned in one of
No.
my shows, Pete, going back several months ago, there was an article in AARP magazine, and which I don't read. I mean, I get it for the discounts, but I don't. My wife and I go through the magazine to just kind of pull out all of the propaganda. AARP is loaded up with propaganda and fear tactics to
Oh, is
try
it
to.
really?
Oh my God! I mean,
Oh.
just to make the senior population very, very concerned and stressed
Oh, I didn't
out.
know that.
It's just unbelievable. It really is. And they almost always have an entertainer or celebrity.
Yes. Yeah. Ringo Starr was on it a couple months
Yes,
ago.
yes, and Samuel L. Jackson is on the
Yes.
current one. And so
Yeah.
that, again, this goes to the Pied Pipers. This goes to the people that you're going to follow and listen to, and they're going to say, you should do this, you should do that, you should think about this, you should think about that. And that's basically to shape you, to kind of get you to fall in line and march along single file toward a particular objective or agenda.
But the
Um,
thing that with Bertrand Russell that I now I agree with what he's saying, because back then America post-war was the nuclear family. They had the father who went to work,
right.
made enough money to support everybody, buy the house, have a car, have the food, mother stayed at home. Life wasn't perfect, but for some reason kids wanted to rebel. But what were they rebelling against? They were rebelling against stability, good jobs, a good economy. Now, after all this rock music hit in the 60s, the entire American family fell apart.
Yeah.
Both parents started working, divorces escalated, everything went to shit.
Yes.
And that's how I was, we were both in that
Hmm.
scene. And so I think whoever created rock and roll of the 60s, I think their plot worked or their scheme
Yeah.
worked to undermine the integrity of the American family and the
Yeah. It was
Western
Tavistock.
culture.
It was
Yeah.
Tavistock with feeds coming in from the Frankfurt School. So the Frankfurt School and Tavistock basically came into being at the same time in the early 1920s.
Okay.
So and all of these deep state entities, they're all interconnected. This is what people have to really understand. They're not standalone. They're not out there. They're not islands unto themselves. They're
Hmm.
all working together. And so, they knew exactly what they were doing. If you remember back, in fact, it's not even that long ago, but over the last 20, 30, 40 years, we would hear the term the culture wars. There's a
Hmm.
culture war. And I remember, listening to this back in the 70s and the 80s. And, I didn't think anything of it. I was young. The culture wars, I didn't care,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
whatever. But as I got older and I got more into the research, I knew exactly what they were talking about. So when they talk about the culture wars, the question that should have been asked is what cultures are at war? What, I mean, when you say culture wars, there's usually two people or two entities or two
Sure.
organizations
Sure.
fighting each other, right?
Sure.
So, but nobody ever asked that question. Nobody ever asked the question like, well, who were the two cultures? Well, the one culture was what you were just talking about. It was the traditional family with a family nucleus, mother and father, and the kids and all that stuff. That's one culture. That was that was the predominant American culture going back, before the counterculture of the 1960s. The other culture that was being implemented was the cultural Marxism through the implementation of pop culture.
Mhm.
So pop culture is it's Netflix, it's your television, it's hot dogs, hamburgers, ball games. That's pop culture.
Yeah.
Because part of the traditional family nucleus embedded in that for many families was an understanding of ancestral traditions going back to, let's say, if you were an Italian family. My mom is she's Italian. My father
Hmm.
was Welsh Irish, but we were brought up in an Italian household, so we had a lot of traditional Italian types of traditions in my household growing up.
Okay.
And so you'd have that, if you're French or German or Mexican, I mean, just pick a uh, a particular heritage. Um, but what the social scientists of Tavistock and the Frankfurt School needed to do was they needed to break that down. They needed to get rid of that because if you have traditions and values outside of what they were looking to implement, then they can't implement their plan. So the whole cultural Marxist agenda was to systematically and methodically continue to bang away at the family nucleus,
Oh, yeah.
and in order to get it to the point where it's dismantled. And you mentioned, divorce rates now are up over 50%. Mothers and fathers are both working. The kids are in preschool. They're in after school. They've essentially have become detached from their families. The parents
Sure.
see the kids maybe very early in the morning, late in the evening when mom and dad get home from work, on the weekends, but mom and dad have a lot of errands to run on the weekends. So,
Yeah.
so what happens is the kids then become essentially wards of the state, and they are being raised by people outside the family.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, what are the values of the people outside of the family? Are they the values of the mother and father? I mean, you don't know. What
Yeah.
are they really being taught in after school? I mean, we now see in schools, like in elementary schools and middle schools and even high schools, where they've gone with and I use the word very loosely, the curriculum,
Yeah.
and teaching little kids at 5 and 6 years old that there's really no such thing as a specific gender
Oh, I
until you
know.
get to a certain point. This is all part of the process of breaking down.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the cultural Marxist agenda that's in play, that has been in play for a long time. Before it got to that, what they did was they had to get the mother out of the house, because most mothers back in the day were perfectly happy staying home, taking care of the kids and taking care of the home, while dad was out working and making sure everybody had a roof over their head.
Mhm.
And everybody wants to say, well, the cultural Marxist and the far left uh, aspect of society wants to say that, oh, that's old fashioned. Things have changed, and
Yeah.
no, things have changed not because it was old fashioned. Things would change because it was systematically attacked.
Well, sure. I think what the communists and the Marxists did is they said, okay, here's America. It's a massive country with multiple climates. And back then it was like 200 million people. We can't just park our ships off the shore and invade. And we can't nuke them because the land won't be inhabitable. So how do we destroy them? Well, we'll infiltrate their police stations and their politicians and their
Right.
White House, and
Academia.
we'll academia will destroy the family. And they I mean, look at us. Look, I mean, people are so confused. They don't know if they're boys or girls. They don't know what restroom to go in. They don't know, you
Yeah.
know, you can't afford anything now.
No.
Um, I mean, if I was ever single, I don't know how I'd survive. How single people survive. So I think they've methodically destroyed our country
Yes.
without firing a shot, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's just what they were trying to do, and I think they've succeeded.
Yeah. It's a whole problem, reaction, solution, right? So
Yeah.
it's to create the problem. There's going to be a reaction. People like, I can't deal with this. I can't live. I can't afford this. I can't afford that. I can't afford food, a home,
Yeah. Yeah.
so on, right? And then the solution is going to be, well, we have to put this egalitarian system into place, communism, right? Marxism, but
Yeah.
they'll refer to it as egalitarian, which it's not. You know, whenever you look at any of the any communist structure around the world, it's not egalitarian. I mean, there's still an elite structure sitting on
Hmm.
top of the masses, the population.
Yeah.
So the whole thing that this is ultimately going to be a system where everybody's going to be equal. Uh, it's just total nonsense. I mean, here's a
Oh,
quote
yeah.
from going back to the Frankfurt School. Now, the other thing I should mention, the Frankfurt School, the Rothschilds are from Frankfurt, Germany,
Hmm.
and there's a lot. Germany is a hotbed for Marxism, and I mean, won't get into it in this show because it's a higher discussion. But think about the Beatles in Hamburg, Germany,
Oh, yeah.
and Hamburg is one of the media capitals of Germany, and it's about a 5 or 6 hour drive from the Frankfurt School.
Wow.
Okay, and the Rothschilds, like I said, they hail from Frankfurt. But here's a quote from Max Horkheimer. Max was one of the quote intellectuals from the Frankfurt School. So I mentioned about how Lenin Marxism was really defined by violence and revolution, and the Frankfurt School, their version of Marxism was, hey, we can't do that. We're not going to win anything by doing that. So we've got to do this, very systematically and very subliminally. So
Hmm.
this is a quote: "The revolution won't happen with guns. Rather, it will happen incrementally, year by year, generation by generation. We will gradually infiltrate their educational institutions and their political offices,
Yep.
transforming them slowly into Marxist entities as we move towards universal egalitarianism." So they use the word egalitarianism. But the way they do this is to gaslight the population. They tell
Oh
you
yeah.
they either tell you what you want to hear and then do the complete opposite. We see this all the time with
Oh yeah.
politics,
Oh yeah.
all the time with politics. Or they will look to challenge your thinking to the point where you start to doubt yourself, you start to question yourself, and
Oh
then
yeah.
what happens is then you start to self-sabotage. An example I use with this is when they went after the family nucleus. What the cultural Marxists did, you know, their program was to go to women through the media and to convince them that, why do you want to be home? Is that what you really want to do? Do you really
Hmm.
want to stay home and take care of your kids and take care of the home? I mean,
Yeah.
don't you
Yeah.
want to do what your husband does? Don't you want to go out to work? Don't you want to do
Yeah.
that? Now, a lot of women were perfectly happy with staying home
Yeah.
and taking on a traditional role. But what happened was it's repetition. We keep going back to repetition.
Oh
It
yeah.
was beating them
Yeah.
over the head over and over and over
Yeah.
again in the media, in
Yeah.
movies, in TV, in magazines like Parent Magazine,
Sitcoms.
sitcoms,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
right, that just kept hammering away and hammering away to the point where women took the bait. A lot of women took the bait. Now, to help them take the bait, what they also did was to make it very difficult to own a home and have a life on one income. So, I mean, if you can have a life and a decent home on one income, then, well, one parent can stay home. But if you can't do that and you need two incomes to be able to do that, well, there you go. Now the mom has got to leave the home and go to work.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, people think that this is crazy stuff. They think that, oh, this is just conspiratorial stuff, that, this guy, Mike, he's crazy.
Oh yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but, Pete,
You
but
see it now.
the crazy part is the people that believe that this is all coincidence. I mean, every day you wake up and you can systematically see, if you wake up, what's going on.
Yeah.
You can see like the levers they're pulling down or pulling up, the buttons that they're pushing, the switches that are going up
Oh
and
yeah.
down to be able to maneuver and to manipulate.
Well, I don't know if you follow Candace Owens. Do you follow her at all?
Occasionally, I'll listen to her. Yes.
Well, she's got this whole thing where she's discovered that Kamala Harris's father was a Marxist. I think it was her father or her grandfather. It was her father was a Marxist, and that Kamala poses as a young lady with this woman that she claims was her grandmother. But Candace discovered that it wasn't her grandmother. It was help. It was a black woman that was help or a
She said it was
maid.
her mother.
Yeah, she said it was her mother or her
Yes, and
grandmother.
it wasn't her mother in her
And,
book.
but
Yeah.
anyway, Kamala's a Marxist.
Yes.
And she's, oh, no, 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 I'm not. And she goes out there and cackles and laughs and tries to gaslight us. But it turns out I'm seeing all of this now. It's like, okay, they're trying to get her into office so they can perpetuate what they've been
Yeah.
doing for years. I don't know what Trump is. But it's funny when you start to see it all, you begin to go, well, what do I just go live in the mountains,
Yeah.
and build a cabin or you see it everywhere.
Well, most people don't even know what a Marxist is. They don't even know what it represents, Peter. That's the problem. So it's the term has been the term does not have the same impact as it
Yeah.
used to have because people don't understand the history. They don't understand going back to Karl Marx and understanding the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, understanding the Frankfurt School and everything else, in between. But
Hmm.
they have a lot of terms. So Marxist, communist. You'll hear some of these politicians. Hillary Clinton used to say that she was a progressive. Well, progressive is another term for Marxist.
Sure.
So if Kamala Harris turns around and says, I'm not a Marxist, I'm not a communist, I'm a progressive." A progressive, I mean, in the minds of the average person means they're progressing, they're moving forward, right? And
Yeah.
then they then
Yeah.
they then they interpret that as moving forward to a better place. No, it doesn't mean that. It means progress. To progress means moving forward. It doesn't mean you're moving forward to a better place.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that.
Who knows where you're going to end up.
The other,
they don't tell you where we're going to end up.
Obama was the same thing. Obama was a
Yeah.
Marxist progressive, and his slogan was hope and change, right? Hope and change. What does that mean? What does hope and change mean? Well, it's open for interpretation. The word hope and change means different things to different people, right? So that's why they throw these little taglines out there. And that's how they pull people in, because they know that it's leading. They're going to lead it to the person to interpret what it means. They will never define what hope means. They will never define what their version of change means. They're going to leave it to you to interpret it.
And a lot of their taglines I've seen are in Marxist doctrine. I don't know if hope and change is one of them, but some of the things, their mantras are very Marxist. I wish I could remember the one that Kamala uses, but it's all a Marxist.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yep. I forgot what she says too, but I know what you're referring to. But part of the cultural Marxist game plan is they create slogans.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you research cultural Marxism and you research the Frankfurt School and these other entities that are involved in this, slogans are very important. Very important, because people grab onto slogans, and most people just parrot whatever it is that they hear from the television set. So slogans are very important for them to be able to push their agenda forward.
Taking any calls 5 days a week, where every other customer says filthy things to me. Working second shift, I never see my kids. There's no escape cause I can't make the bids. This call center blues gonna be the end of me. The guy sitting next to me, he's a real